Okay. Okay. Oh, God. Holy cow. All right. Okay, got it. Whew. All right then. Well, hello. RC from the Mountaintop Joiner Shop here. In this video and in videos subsequent to it, since I presume this is going to become a series, I'm just going to do a build. So you get to see a project come together from start to finish in my shop the way I like to do it. So you get a sense of my order of operations, the workflow, and of course maybe pick up some ideas along the way. So as I work, I'm going to describe some of the things I'm doing and why I'm doing them that way. Other times I'll just turn the mic up, play some music, and maybe share some tips on screen as I think of them. So it's like one of those deals. You know how people who like to golf or like to watch other people golf just to relax, or people that fish like to watch other people fish, kind of like that. So if you're a woodworker, like to watch other people get some woodworking done, and I know I am, why don't you take a load off, kick your feet up, grab a drink, grab a snack, and join me for this build. The build that I'm doing is a trestle table of my own design in white oak for a commission, and I'm anxious to get started. So why don't you join me as I get this thing going. So at this point, I am just getting started. So I got my first board up on the bench, and a lot of times when I do a table build, I like to build the tabletop first, and then I kind of flip it upside down and kind of build the table upside down from there. I don't think I'm going to do it that way this time because I feel like that gives the table more time to kind of move and get a little bit out of flat in the time it takes me to build the rest of the base. So this time I'm taking a little bit different tack. I'm going to build some of the table base components at least first. Maybe get some of the joinery ready for that. Maybe even build the entire base and then build the top and then kind of flip it over and attach the base to it like that. So that's what I'm thinking. So I grabbed this first piece because I think I wanted to start with some table legs. I have a certain leg style that's kind of a signature of mine, and I'm kind of excited to revisit that theme again. So I got a big old piece of 8/4 white oak here, and I'm marking out where I want to put my legs. So this giant piece of 8/4 white oak is both longer and wider than I need it to be because I would like to be able to get maybe an extra leg out of it. And not only that, I also am very picky about the grain direction and the components. So for instance, the leg that I'm doing is straight along one side and has a little bit of a curve to it on the other. So what I look for is the cathedral grain pattern in the face of the board. And I try to take a chunk out of that board where the curves in the cathedral grain match the curve that I'm going to be cutting in one side of the leg. So it looks like I got myself a leg right here where the grain kind of curves to a point down here. And likewise, I have further down the board a widening of that grain where I can maybe get another leg out of it bottom to bottom or foot to foot going that way. I can get another leg right here, and looks like I can get another one right here with the way the grain pattern looks. And this board is giving me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies because there's a little bit of surface checking here and there, but I think I can work around it. And even in cases where that surface checking is present, it appears to me to be pretty shallow. There's no surface checking on the other side, thank goodness. And so I think when I mill it, I'm going to take most of my material off of this side. I think I'll be sitting pretty when it's all said and done. And I might even be able to get a fifth leg out of the way back end of the board here. And that's kind of extra insurance, should I need it later if something goes awry along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this out. I think my legs are, I got it on my phone here, about 70 centimeters long and about 12 centimeters wide. I'm looking at this end grain where it was kind of painted. It doesn't appear that there's any end checking there at all, but I still like to leave myself a little extra length. So I'm going to measure down from there to maybe 80. I'll give myself an extra 10 centimeters or so. Mark that. Looks like the same is true on this side. I should be able to come down 80 from there. I'll just take a T-square and I'm going to do a cross cut right there. I'm going to come down another 80 from here. This is centimeters, by the way. I do work in metric. I'll put a link in the description about why I work in metric. I think I'll do another cross cut right there. Just a big fat carpenter's pencil there. I think I want this last one. Let's see. What's the grain doing? That's pretty good because there's a little bit of sapwood here that's lighter in color. In order to keep the colors pretty consistent, I think I'm just going to do a full-on cross cut right here. So I'm going to cut all the way across. And that kind of simplifies breaking down my stock. So rather than try to mill this giant board flat, which would be just a royal pain in the butt, way too much work, I'm going to cut this into closer to its rough dimensions before flattening all these smaller boards. I find that to be much easier. So I'm going to cross cut here, rip cut at a little bit wider than 12 centimeters because 12 centimeters is how wide my legs are going to be. And then I'm going to mill those parts down to make my legs. Okay, so at this point I have all of my leg stock such that it is milled close to final thickness. So I have flat parallel faces on the faces of my leg stock. And then I finished up a process I had already started, which is to make a reference edge that is square and straight that I can now put against my reference stops on my track saw and then cut these pieces of leg stock to final length. And I am very thankful that I left my stock overlong when I originally cross-cut it out, because in my original design, I thought I might be using dominoes to attach the legs to both the battens and to the sled feet. However, upon further inspection of my domino collection, it appears that there's no configuration of dominoes that I could employ that would make these joints as strong as I really would like them to be. You see, this design is one that is using thinner legs. I want the legs of this trestle table to be elegant as opposed to what you normally see in a trestle table, which are legs that are massive and even elephantine. So I'm going to be relying heavily upon traditional joinery that is overbuilt in order to make this design work, which means I'm going to be adding integral tenons to the length of these legs. So they're going to be a little bit longer than I originally intended. So now I'm going to cross-cut them to that final length that incorporates the integral tenons on both ends, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so when I cross-cut these to final length on the track saw, that was a Friday, and these have had a good long weekend to kind of settle down. If they're going to move at all and get twisted or bowed or whatever, they've had time to do that, but it appears that they've already reached equilibrium with my shop and that they're doing just fine. Everything's nice and flat. And that brings me to a point about milling by hand that people don't always realize. Sometimes I'll post something on social media and people look at something and say, how thick is that thing that you're building there? And the answer to that, honestly, in a lot of cases is, I don't know. It's as thick as it needed to be in order to be flat. Because I'm doing this by hand. Once I get this close to the thickness it needs to be, if it's flat, then I'm done. And I don't even really know how thick that is. Like, this is about 42 millimeters thick. I want it to be about 40 or so I'm doing good. I don't need to mill these again, run through the thickness planer again, or any of that. I'm done. So now I'm ready to continue shaping my legs. I have two parallel faces. I have a reference edge that is perpendicular to the faces, and I have one edge that is still rough sawn. And the reason I left this rough sawn is because I'm going to be cutting away all this material anyways when I cut the shape of these legs out on the bandsaw. So let me show you how I do that. So my weapon of choice for marking out the curve in these legs is this guy right here. And I actually have two of these. There's another one over here that's yellow. These are made by Lee Valley, and they call these drawing bows. So check these things out. So it's basically a piece of fiberglass, and it has a little strap on the back of it. You put a little bend in it, tighten the strap, and now I have a nice curve here. This one is a symmetrical drawing bow, which means that the curve has a pretty consistent movement to it from end to end. And then the one that I'm going to use for this particular instance has a little bit of taper over the length of it. So this fiberglass is tapered, it's thick on one end, thin on the other. And when I tighten it, the curve it creates is an asymmetric curve. So it's a curve that steepens as it approaches the end of the drawing bow there. So hopefully you can see that okay. And this is what I like to use. Lay it on my stock and draw the line that's going to create the curvature in the leg. Okay, so my design for these legs calls for the top of the leg, which is going to be this end, to be about 12 centimeters, and the bottom of the leg to be about half of that. Because I like to work in a whole number of proportions in cases like this. And so what I'm going to do is take my ink or T rule here and put it on the reference face, which is the side that's not rough sawn. It's been hand planed. And draw my line at about 6 centimeters. And I might want to darken that so I can see it better with a fatter pencil lead. And then at the other end, I'm going to go a full 12, which is about yay far. And I just need that right at the end of the leg there. And let's thicken that too. A little bit easier to see. So the grain on this leg is such that, the curve of the grain is sweeping in like this and then straightening out as it reaches the end here. That's exactly what I want and why I cut out this stock the way I did. So I'm going to take my drawing bow Put it on here. I'm going to put the bottom at my mark. And I want the taper of the leg to start out fairly straight and then curve off to meet the final width. So I line that up like that and then just kind of eyeball it and see if it looks the way I want it to. And right now there's still too much of an inward bend at this midpoint here. So I'm going to slide this forward because most of the asymmetric nature of this curve is at that end of the drawing bow. So all I have to do is slide this down if I want to get the bottom of the leg to be a little bit straighter. The thing about that though, when I look at it, is it makes the midpoint of the leg kind of look a little fat, a little bit like it's got cankles. So maybe a little bit of inward curvature to the leg at the midpoint isn't the worst thing in the world. So I'm going to just draw it back just a little bit, see how that looks. A little more. Now just keep moving the bow around until I see a curve that jives with my sensibilities here. I'm digging that. There's just a slight inward curve right there, and then it tapers off to the full width. I can dig on that. That's pretty good. So I'm going to hold this down like this. I'm going to use a nice thick pencil, and I'm going to gently draw in that line. I want that line to be nice and fat, so I'm going over it a lot because I want that to be easy to see when I'm over at the bandsaw cutting this out. Now you may or may not be able to see that line. Let's see if I can get it to where you can see it better. But you can see how the curve of that line kind of matches the curve of the grain to some extent. That is a good design right there, is to be cognizant of what the grain patterns in the wood are doing and make sure that they complement the shape of whatever furniture parts that it is that you're making. So I'm going to go to the bandsaw and cut this out. And then once this is done being shaped to this curve, I'm going to use this leg as a template for all three of the other legs. So there you have it. There is the beginnings of one of my table legs. So now I need to take this bandsaw in service and smooth it out. There's a couple ways I can do that. One is on a spindle sander, which I have. Currently my spindle sander has issues though. So, and of course, what I prefer to do in any case is use hand planes. So I'm going to break out a special hand plane for this particular purpose and see if it works out okay on this white oak. So this here is my weapon of choice for big sweeping curves like this. It's not a power tool at all, it's a hand plane. And not only that, it's a vintage hand plane, because here's the deal. So this is a Stanley number 113 compass plane. And what it does is it has a steel, like a spring steel sole that you can adjust with this knob right here and change the curvature of it. So let me tighten that up a little bit so you can see. See how that sole is curved now? So I can curve this to match the profile of whatever curve I'm trying to plane. Just like that. And for big, long, sweeping curves like this, this is the way to go. But the thing is, there isn't a modern manufacturer of hand planes that makes one of these that's worth a damn. So this is one of the few vintage planes I have in my entire collection. It's a Stanley 113 compass plane, and it'd be hard to do what I do without it. So I often lament the fact that there isn't a modern manufacturer who has the gumption to pull this off. I'm talking to you, Lee Nielsen. I'm talking to you, Veritas. Come on now. Make one of these. Do it. Do it now. All right. So let me set up so you can see this in action. The way this works is you adjust the sole of the plane until it matches the curvature that you're trying to plane, and then a little bit more. So it has just a little bit of a rock to it. Just like that. It's just a little bit of a rock there. And then what I'm going to do is, just like with the spoke shave actually, I'm going to try to maintain contact with the part of the sole that is right in front of the mouth of the plane. And that's what I'm going to do to smooth out the bandsaw lines on this leg and ultimately smooth it as well. There's a little bit of backlash in the mechanism there. Let me straighten it just a little bit. There we go. Advance the blade a little more. Here where it's straighter, I'm using a straighter sole. Like that. Straighten it a little more so I can get the end of this. This is working beautifully. This is just buttery smooth, so there's no sanding involved here at all. This is great. When I do the part that has a little bit more curvature, because remember this is an asymmetric curve that steepens as it goes along to the top of the leg, I'm going to curve the sole more and more. And the sole likes to get a little bit sticky and hard to push, so I'm going to go ahead and wax it right on the other part of the sole where it comes into contact with the wood typically, right in front of the mouth there. And while I'm doing this, I'm kind of half keeping an eye on the line that I drew with the drawing bow earlier, which is on this face right here, and making sure that I don't go over that. And then once I've got this good and smooth, I'm going to start looking down the length of it like this, and seeing that it's a nice fair curve. There isn't any kind of wavy graviness going on there. And so far I'm doing pretty good. This part at the top of the leg is a little bit difficult to engage at the corner there. But once I've gotten the bandsaw marks most of the way removed, the planing goes a lot more smoothly. And so I'm able to take longer and longer passes that fair the curve a lot better than if I'm just taking little shortcuts. In a pinch, you could use a spoke shave for this, but the thing is the sole on a spoke shave is so short that it tends to get pretty chattery, and it's harder to fair the curve that way. So I like the stability of having kind of 2 points from which I can control the chatteriness of the plane and stabilize it a little bit. Nice and fair, not lumpy at all. Liking the way that looks. Once I have this good and dialed into the curve that I want, what I'm going to do is find the next leg, read the grain, see where it matches up best to the curvature of the grain pattern. Let's try this. And put them right in front of each other like this. Let me put a planing stop behind them. Big long planing stop. Just like that. Get them good and lined up. And then come in here with my thick pencil. Let me put it right to the end actually. And I can trace that curve onto the next piece of leg stock and cut that out on the bandsaw. And I'm going to use this one for all 3 of the other legs to make sure that that line is transferring consistently. And one thing you'll notice here, when I push these against each other, having taken this giant chunk of wood off of that leg with the bandsaw, that released some tension in the wood that caused it to bow a little bit over its length. Just a little bit. So that's where that extra thickness that I left from milling it can come in handy. As I take more and more material off, there's always a chance that the wood's going to move a little bit. And so I've left myself a little leeway to flatten these legs again and make sure that they're good and square and flat and ready for joinery in the long run. So not the end of the world that this has moved a little bit, having removed all that material off of it. So I'm going to take this next board over to the bandsaw and cut it out and smooth it with the compass plane the exact same way as I did the first. So here is my second leg all cut out and smoothed with the compass plane. And here's the first leg that I used as a template to mark this one. And the reason I know this is the one I used as the template is because it has pencil lead all over the corners here from where I used it to do that. So what I like to do at this point is not only check to make sure that this is square along its length with a little engineer square, but also show them to each other like this. So I get them all lined up, and now I can see where I'm flush and they're nice and even, and then I can see where this one has a little bit more material here and here that needs removing still. So I'm going to draw little lines on there and then continue to remove material with the compass plane to get these a little bit closer to each other. And this isn't super critical, but I do like to get them at least close. This isn't a joinery surface or anything. It's just, you know. So I'd like to think that these legs are coming along quite nicely now, but there's still plenty to do for when I need to finish shaping. I like to round over these inside corners. And later on, I'd like to put a big wide chamfer that follows this curve on both of these edges on each of these legs. And that I'll actually be using the compass plane for. But before I can do that, I need to cut my tenons. There's going to be tenons on both ends of each of these legs. And when I do that, I like to leave my legs or any stock I'm going to be cutting joinery in as square as possible. It just makes it easier to mark out the joinery and cut it. I need to do that yet, but before I can cut those tenons, I need to cut my mortises, because I'd certainly prefer to cut my mortises first. So I need to make my battens and my sled feet, cut out the mortises in those, then I can cut the tenons and the legs to fit those mortises, and then I can finish shaping the legs, and then we'll be off and running with finish prep, at least for the legs. That's what I got coming up yet. And while I was doing the rest of these legs, I did think of a couple things about the Stanley 113 compass plane that I'd like to share. One of the reasons that I dearly wish that a modern manufacturer using modern manufacturing processes would make a new version of this is it's ripe for a redesign, especially in terms of ergonomics. Holding this plane is like holding a porcupine that's gripping a plane blade in its teeth. It is horrid. I got all kinds of bruises and red marks and stuff on my hands just for doing these legs. So if you could imagine if you're doing a really large project where you have to do a lot of planing with a compass plane, how that would beat up your hands. But there's plenty of other areas in which this could benefit from modern manufacturing processes as well. One of the things I did do with this plane is replace the original stock blade, which was all kinds of a mess when I got this plane, with one by Ron Hawk. Hawk blades are great replacement options for vintage planes like this. So I replaced both the blade and the plane iron, which I believe are a smidgen thicker than the originals. That will give the blade a little bit more stiffness when moving through the cut. It's less likely to chatter that way. So if you do pick up one of these vintage compass planes, I could easily recommend getting a blade from Ron Hawk to help improve its performance a little bit. That's enough about that plane. Well, I'd say we got off to a pretty nice start with this trestle table build, and I hope that in the course of this video you got a chance to pick up some tips that maybe will help you out in your shop, or at the very least got a chance to relax and see some woodworking happening. So I appreciate you joining me for this video, and I hope that you'll join me in the next one. Now if you like what you saw here, please hit like and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. Also hit the little bell icon if you want to be notified anytime I release a new video. And if you didn't like what you saw here, keep it to yourself, pal. Or watch one of my other videos. You might like one of those. Thank you for watching.